Hello and welcome everybody to this semester's first VUB Chair in Surveillance Studies seminar. We are happy to welcome today Dr. Shivangi Narayan. Shivangi was awarded her PhD in December 2020, following submission of her thesis entitled Policing and the Construction of the Criminal, a study of bureaucracy and algorithms in Delhi police. She is currently working on the AGOPOL project that compares perspectives on algorithmic governance and policing from Norway, India, Brazil, Russia, and South Africa. You can find more information through the link that I will post in the chat in a minute. Today, we invited her to discuss her work on the police use of facial recognition technology in India, and more specifically, on how the technology intersects with power and further reinforces marginalization. As is the case with all of our seminars, the presentation will last for about 30 minutes. I would kindly like to ask everyone to mute their microphones and cameras. After the presentation, there is time left for questions, so please don't hold back. You can either use the raise your hand function and ask questions directly, or simply put them in the chat. So without further ado, welcome Shivangi.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to this seminar and for listening to my work on facial recognition technology in India. I've been researching on the use of facial recognition by the police in India for the past 1 year. And in the course of this presentation, and I'll talk about the use of FRT by the police. And with that, I'll try to explain how these technologies are no longer just neutral technologies, but intersect in such ways with power that can further push the people who are already pushed to the margins and destroy their lives further. So yeah, I'll just start. So as I just say, it's not a simple case of misuse of technology by the police. It's just so much more. So I just want to introduce what is facial recognition, how it's used currently by the police. So as you would understand, it's a technology, it's a biometric technology that aims to authenticate or identify a person using their face. But I wouldn't say that it's a simple case of authenticating or a simple case of identifying. There's not a simple case of matching. What it does is it converts your face to a grid of zeros and ones, and then it matches with the database that it already has. And again, this matching is not linear. It's algorithmic, so that the computer learns to match certain kind of face from the database that it has. And why this algorithmic matching is different from a linear matching is that the algorithm creates a type of a face, and then from that type of a face, it matches the individual face to its database. So it's very, it's an important point. Why I say it's an important point, because with facial recognition, you can have a type of a person, a type of a face that, that can signify a certain kind of person. So, you train a model to identify criminals, train a certain kind of data set. So then you can, through technology, create a type of a person who is a criminal, so to say. Talk about it later. But I just wanted to touch upon FRT and the technology, because so far the kind of research that we've seen on facial recognition that has come out, and rightly so. I'm not denying that. I'm not saying that. I'm not criticizing that research. I'm just saying that till now the research has been about the problems of accuracy, the problems of misidentification, the problem that the software, the algorithm would at one point not be able to identify a certain kind of people, and obviously that has its own problems, But as some of the researchers have said that it's more than just the problem of a biased data set. Because when you have models to find out who is a criminal, then obviously the data set is not biased against certain kind of people who are already considered criminal. So and in India as well, when facial recognition came to India, there was a lot of talk about how it is a technology that has been imported from the West and how it is not trained on Indian faces, so it cannot identify them. So there are problems of identification, and misidentification can happen, which can lead to a lot of issues. But here I am, I'm trying to tell you that here are these softwares who are now being trained on specifically Indian faces. One of the researchers from these companies that I spoke to, who works on creating facial recognition for Delhi police, said that he is training the algorithm on Bollywood faces, because apparently Bollywood is the most representative facial data set that they have. So yeah, I mean, there is a lot of work on accuracy and identification and representative data sets. And what I'm trying to say is that identification or misidentification, the story is so much more than that. So the story is about how this technology intersects with power. So which brings me to the current discussion of the use of facial recognition by the Delhi police. But before that, I would like to talk about the Delhi riots, which happened in 2020. They are important because this is one of the events where this technology was used extensively by the Delhi police to identify alleged accused, alleged rioters, and them behind bars. So I'll just give you like a overview of what happened in February 23 to 25, 2020. There was nationwide protest on something called a Citizenship Amendment Act, which according to CAA, only Hindus, or only people who identify as Hindus would have a right to Indian citizenship, while anybody who is non-Hindu would have to again verify themselves as citizens through a nationwide and national registration of citizens called the NRC. So this amendment to the Citizenship Act led to huge protests in India, which were led by Muslim women, and Northeast Delhi, which is predominantly a Muslim majority area. It's also a fringe area, so to say, a marginalized area. Mostly residents are immigrants from the neighboring states of Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, or Bihar. The Hindus that live there are from the low caste, and even the Muslims are from low caste. And more or less, people are involved in petty trade, businesses, scrap dealings, so things like that. So the protest started in those areas because obviously they were the ones who were going to be affected most by if the CAA was implemented. One of these days, there was a call for a nationwide strike in solidarity by one of the leaders, and the strike led to conflicts between the Hindus and the Muslims, and the riots went on for 3 days, from 23 to 25th February. And according to eyewitness accounts, the police kind of gave certain people a free hand about, to do whatever they wanted to do. So after the Delhi riots stopped or were stopped on February 25, 2020, the investigations began by the Delhi police. And so I'll just show you. So this is Northeast Delhi. This is kind of, I'm not showing you, it's not, I'm not trying to show you how poor this area is or how badly kept this area is. I'm just trying to tell you, trying to put in perspective that this is one of the places in the national capital of India, fairly big country, fairly rich country, but this is how some of the people in the capital live. And you can see the camera is right there. The CCTV camera is right there, but nothing else. So just trying to put in perspective what Northeast Delhi looks like. So yeah, so investigations began. There were 750 first information reports, so in India, first information reports or FIRs are basically when the police takes down the complaint and the case goes to court after its preliminary investigation. Around 1100 rioters were claimed to be identified using facial recognition. This claim was made by the Home Minister of India, who categorically stated in the parliament that facial tech was used to find rioters, 300 of whom came from the neighboring states of Uttar Pradesh. And he said that facial recognition does not discriminate on the basis of caste, religion, or gender, and only people who were causing trouble were identified and caught using facial recognition technology. So all good, unless I went and kind of inquired about what happened during these investigations. I'll give you a case of, I mean, there were many such cases, but I'll give you two very prominent examples of which will kind of give you an overview of what happened during these investigations. So one of the cases is for this guy whom I'll call Amir, because the cases are all subjects. I cannot really give you the names. So this guy Amir has been caught on one of the CCTV cameras holding what you can call is a rod. He's holding it like this, and he's wearing a blazer, just like how I'm wearing a blazer, formal pants, shirts, and he's holding this viper. In the evidence provided by the police, this is the only screen grab that is being given to the lawyers of Amir as evidence of of whatever he was implicated in doing. In the charge sheet, in the complaint, if one reads it, one of the complaints says that Amir is holding a viper in his hand and he wants to. So he's holding the viper and he's walking and he wants to break the camera that is recording his footage, although the camera is not broken because the footage has been recorded and retrieved by the Delhi police. So we really don't know what they're talking about. But in the second complaint, using the same screen grab, using the same video footage, the charge sheet says that Amir is holding what in Hindi is called a danda, but it's just basically a rod, a big bamboo rod, and he's holding that and he's running towards a big mob with the intention of causing riots. How the Delhi police knew about Amir's intention from the video footage, we don't really know, but that's what's written in the charge sheet. And the charge sheet is a formal document which will be presented to the judge, to the lawyers for when the case is tried in court. So it's a fairly formal document. It's not, they're not speculating. It's something that has been written after a lot of thought. And basis this one video footage and this one screen grab that has been provided to the lawyers, Amir has been implicated in 3 cases. One of them is murder. The other is conspiracy of riots. And the third is of burning an auto rickshaw showroom, of which there is no video footage, or it would have been provided in the charge sheet. So, so this is one of the cases, and Amir has been implicated in 3 cases, and he's in one of the most notorious FIRs in Delhi riots investigation, which implicates a number of people, and Amir is still in jail. It's been 2.5 years. His case has still not been tried, and he still doesn't know when he's going to get paid. Another case that I want to talk to you about is about, so Amir also is a Muslim youth. I would say that most of the people who've been arrested in these 750 FIRs are Muslims. Most of the people who are still in jail, whose cases have not gone to court, are Muslim youth. Who have no hope of getting bail are Muslim. So second case I want to talk to you about is Sazip. Sazip is is a grocery store owner in Northeast Delhi, and he was in his shop the day the riots broke out. So when he saw people fighting and when he saw arson and riots in front of the shop, he shut down his shop from inside and tried escaping from the back door. So he did escape from the back door, but when he went a little far and he turned around and he saw that people were entering his shop. They had broken the door and they entered his shop and they were breaking the shop. So he took out his phone from his pocket. So the action was that he put his hand in his pocket and he took out his camera phone and he started filming those people. So this filming I would like to tell you about is very essential because people in Northeast Delhi, after a lot of interviews and after I've spoken to a lot of them personally, because police doesn't believe them. So for Sazip, it was very important that he filmed the breaking of his own shop so that he would have evidence that something like that really happened to him. Also because compensation claims might want evidence. So he filmed the breaking, and then after he filmed it for like a minute or a minute and a half, he ran towards his shop because he wanted to save it because according to him, that was the only thing that he had for his livelihood, and he'd been running that shop with, I mean, his family had been running it for generations. Sazip is now in jail for murder and for riots because the police said that when he took out the phone from his pocket to film the people who were breaking his shop, that was actually a gun, and he took out the gun and he shot at those people. Here I would like to tell you about how different technologies also intersect. So how Sazip, when he left the area around 7:30 at night, and around 10 o'clock, somebody was murdered in his shop. He had two phones. One phone is what he took with him. The other phone was left behind at the shop. According to that phone's location data, Sazip is now implicated in the murder that happened in his shop. Both Sazip and Amir are still in jail. Their cases have not been, they've not even gone to court. According to their lawyers, the cases are faulty at many levels. The charges are not even cognizable, but they are still in jail, and they have no idea when they will be free. Sazip's father died because he couldn't take the trauma of his son being in jail. Sazip was supposed to get married on 25th of February. Obviously, his marriage broke, and all sorts of problems have fallen on this family. So now after giving you these are two cases, and so many of these so many things like these cases. I'm not saying they're solitary cases. There's so many other cases just like them. Women of Northeast Delhi, whom I've been talking to quite extensively now, told me that when the police came and when the riots were happening, the police came and they asked the police to come inside the gullies, the lanes, and stop the rioting. The police said that they had no power to do anything, and they ran and they didn't really help them. That was just kind of being the picture of how helpful the police was. My objective of telling you about these two cases and this investigation is that in both the cases, the people were identified accurately. So accuracy or misidentification or identification was not the trouble. So technically, this algorithm, the software worked beautifully. It identified people correctly, but we have to understand how facial recognition is not just a technology, but it's a system. It's a socio-technical system, and it interacts at every stage of its development with the social. So obviously the modeling and the data and everything, we have people, and we've spoken at length about the biases at that stage. I'm talking about at the user stage and how these technologies intersect with certain kind of forces, certain kind of authoritarian states or policing, which has always been anti-marginalized, and what kind of result they produce. Another thing, why again we have to understand it as a socio-technical system, because the ideas of seeing what we know, especially in vision technologies, we're talking about comparing these technologies like facial recognition or any identification softwares to how human beings look at things. So one of the researchers, I forget his name, he's talking about that when human beings see something, they see it and then they know it. But here it is the case that you know it before you even see it. And that kind of inversion is something that we really need to understand, because if you already know that we are going to see a riot, or if you already know that the person we are going to identify is an accused, is a criminal, etc., that's how further investigation, further reasoning is going to go. So the entire system is entangled in bureaucracy, in the society, in the political situation of the country. Currently, what we're going on, we see in India is a special case of not a special case, I'm sure, but I mean what we see in India is the rise of an authoritarian state, which is based on a single identity, certain religion, certain caste, and anybody who does not conform to that identity is an outsider. It's somebody to be shunned. Muslim are very easily constructed as the outsider. So it's very easy for the police and the state to use this technology to construct the Muslim youth as the outsider, as the person who would create trouble for the Hindu majoritarian state. So here we have to understand how potent it becomes as a technology, as a weapon, I would say, in the hands of a state who has a certain agenda against a certain kind of population. This population is also already marginalized, already considered to be criminal, already considered to be, these spaces are already considered to be unsafe. And then you use this kind of technology. I mean, one of the interesting things that I would want to say is that there were people who were arrested. Some of them got bail, some of them are still behind bars, just because they were on camera. They were not doing anything. One of these guys I spoke to, he said, I was just walking because I wanted to run and reach my place before something happened. And he got caught on the camera, identified on camera, and he was arrested. So the idea of just being on camera, the idea of just being caught on camera, like caught on camera is caught doing something nasty and then arrested, because probably you're in a certain space where you're already assumed to be a certain kind of person. And then if the camera watches you in that space, then there's no other evidence that is required to basically say that you were doing something or you were not doing something. So once we understand, obviously we have looked at facial recognition technology. Stevens and Keyes have looked at, and they have also said that the biased or unbiased or representative data sets are basically they're not representative of communities, they're representative of the sites of use of these technologies. And that is what I'm trying to understand, that the sites of use of these technology play a big hand on how these technology kind of turn out. By that, I do not mean to say that it's only in the use that they are good or bad. No, they are in their design as well. But unless we understand how these technology kind of interact with the social, the political, the bureaucratic, the state, we will not be able to understand how good or bad they are, and if they should even be used in certain kind of situations. Yeah, I think yeah, another thing, especially I mean in the case of policing, policing is something that I mean, it's not like it takes the technology and it misuses it. In every country, policing has been invented to catch people who were anormative, who were not part of the norms. In India as well, if you look at the history of policing, the institution itself was created so that it can catch hold of people who were low caste, or gypsies, or people who were nomadic, people who were not following a certain kind of living situation, certain kind of way of life, a certain so when the institution itself is such that it was designed with a certain agenda. We have a Criminal Tribes Act in India. So, see, we already have a history of certain kind of discriminatory policing. And to give them a tool like facial recognition, which also has its history in physiognomy and all of that, is to obviously give them a very potent tool, like I just said, to marginalize the already marginalized, because these already marginalized would not be able, would not have any power to fight the state back, and they'll be very easily pushed to the horizon, to the margins by a technology which is considered to be objective and neutral, which is considered to be unbiased. Unbiased in its use, because humans are considered biased, but this technology is not. So the idea that I'm trying to really put in this discussion is that we need to look at facial recognition or biometric technologies in general as an assemblage, as a system which have their back and forth with the social, with the political, with the bureaucratic, and then kind of assess their use, and then kind of approve their use, maybe in certain kind of situation. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to say over it. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Shivangi. If anyone has a question, please raise your hand and take the floor. If not, I would like to start with a question. So thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. I heard you talk a lot about the problems of facial recognition, that it's not a neutral technology, and that it's very political, and especially problematic in the hands of authoritarian states. So my question would be what do you think about, or do you envision, or is it possible to have this kind of technology implemented in a democratic society? And if yes, under what conditions?
Democratic society. Define democratic societies. Really, India is a democracy. So, my point is that, I kind of consider these technologies as having a certain pull and push of their own. And I kind of compare them with the Lord of the Rings, the ring, the powerful ring. And it, obviously the ring was very powerful, and probably with the right kind of person, it was safe. But even Frodo, had certain ideas when he had the ring. So these technologies, they push you towards certain agendas. And maybe beforehand, you did not have those agendas in mind. But these technologies and the promise of what they can do, and the promise of what they can achieve, and the kind of, the veneer of objectivity that they promise, that they say that, oh, we are working with data, and we're working with really objective understanding, and it's all statistical, and it's all mathematical. There is no human consideration. We do not have bias. So you kind of, I think even the most democratic society, even the most fair person would say, why not? Let's look at it. Let's look at it for this, and let's look at it for that. But like Simone Brown would say that, these technologies have their historical lineage, and you need to look at them. Like facial recognition. Why did we start photography photography was invented to identify criminals, more or less. It was a technology to identify certain kind of people who were considered to be criminal. So when you look at the kind of histories that these technologies come with, you don't really, I don't really think that suddenly they would start working fair, or they could be used for fair ends. They can have an influence on certain systems that can be harmful. And plus, especially in my areas of policing and crime is such a subjective subjective subject, in the sense that like a sociologist, we all know that crime is what offends the collective conscience. So it changes every day. And in that subjectivity, if you bring in the mathematical, statistical, whatever of these technologies, I don't think so they can even understand the arbitrariness that crime is, or policing is, or policing country like, I mean, I know India with all kinds of hierarchies of caste and gender and religion. It's absurd to bring these technologies and expect them to give you fair answers, because they have not been designed to do so. And plus, there's so much of arbitrariness, so much of absurdity that I don't think so mathematical representations can really work. So yeah, I mean, I don't know hypothetically, but no. Not in the social arena, where there are just too many parameters, there's just too many variables for them to understand, and not me. So not me. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, thanks. I see some raised hands. First, we have Anand. Anand, please go ahead.
Actually, my name is Murmai, and as per Indian, naming system, that's my father's name. But
okay.
Apologies.
No worries. It's a good icebreaker. So my question to you is, does Indian police use social media data, for example, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook? And how, or is it used for facial recognition or for the purpose of policing? Social media data is used for policing. And the second question, with respect to if you answer yes or no, is does the new Data Protection Act that would be introduced, would it be used for controlling data and invade people's privacy and for a harsher policing? Or what's your opinion on that?
So your question on social media, yes, the police uses social media data. I mean, there are social media cells at every police control room, and they kind of look at, but it's not very, I wouldn't say they don't use it much, but they still look at, like, problematic handles and problematic words and keywords and stuff like that. I don't know whether they use images of on social media for training their facial recognition algorithms. I mean, I've asked them this question, but they haven't responded.
I would like to add some cases, the Bollywood cases that we had, where they actually had, like, before 2021 October, the backup medias of WhatsApp that were unencrypted. So the police, I assume, had taken backup from Google or iCloud, and then they actually, the unencrypted version, they also found deleted messages. So when there was this whole scam about the Bollywood and the drugs and everything involved, and when Sushant Singh Rajput, a very famous Bollywood superstar, died, so many WhatsApp chats were read by the police. So are you aware about this, or
See, I wouldn't give the Indian police a lot of credit that they are going to access clouds. What they are doing is just beating you up, snatching your phone, opening your WhatsApp, and reading it. And yeah, of course, they could have used somebody to decrypt your phone, or maybe take out whatever deleted chats. Indian police is somehow very traditional, if I may say so, in its work. So like everybody says that WhatsApp encryption or decryption or whatever is just as it's as good as how your phone, how secure your phone is in your hands. And Indian police has access to everything once there is an investigation going on. If you have something as high profile as a Bollywood murder/suicide investigation, no holds barred. Just like in the Data Protection Act, it's no holds barred access to the police. The police can have everything and anything on the basis of, because there's an investigation or as a matter of national security or whatever. So the police has no problems accessing any kind of data. I think they can even contact WhatsApp to provide those details if they want to, or whoever for that matter. So Data Protection Act in terms of policing is laughable. I think lawyers would tell you better. But as far as my understanding, it doesn't stop the police from doing anything, whatever it wants to do, whatever it wants to access. And obviously, privacy is a gone case again in terms of the police. I've done my field work with the police, and I know that it's very, very easy if you tell them a car, a registration number of a car or a phone number. And if they really like you and if they trust you or whatever, if they know you, they can easily provide you the details. So, the idea of privacy, the idea of sharing of data, all of that is kind of lost on the police right now. So, yeah, currently, like how they are using the facial recognition system. I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you. In Delhi, Delhi police does not have the authorization to use facial recognition for investigations, for any kind of investigations. There's only an executive order by the High Court of Delhi which allowed the police to use the software to find missing children. And it was passed in 2017. And then obviously they used it. I think they found some children, which was contested later on, that they didn't use FRT to find those children. The accuracy, they have only said that the accuracy is 2%. And then the protest started happening, the CAA protest, and then the riots happened. And they just used it. There was no consent. There was no discussion on the use of FRT for these investigations, and they were used, and nobody has even asked them. There's no accountability in terms of their usage by the police. So the police has all kinds of access, especially Delhi police, because it works under the central government, not a state police, so to say. So Delhi, for people who are not familiar, is a mixed kind of geography, in the sense that it's a union territory and a state. So certain subjects are under the state government, but policing and law and order is under the central government. So unlike other states where the police is a state subject, here it's a central subject. It works directly under the Home Minister. So and the Home Minister can ask Delhi police to do whatever it is. And it has considerably more power, more access than other police of other states, so to say. So yeah, data protection law doesn't really work, or privacy, or anything for that matter. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, we have another question in the chat from Arjun. How was facial recognition technology used in the cases of Amir and Sazip? How did specifically facial recognition technology impact the prosecution? If the video footage captured these individuals in a recognizable way, how would the use or not use of facial recognition technology impact the situation in a different manner? To me, the issue addressed here is surveillance in general and not just the use of facial recognition technology specifically. He also wants to thank you for the amazing presentation.
Thank you. I don't know how amazing when it didn't really tell you about FRT use. See, Amir and Sazip were recognized, identified on the basis of facial recognition. They were part of a crowd. They were part of a video footage that the police had access to, and it would have been very difficult for them to identify both of them had it not been for this software and how it's linked to the Aadhaar database or the motor vehicle database. So, I mean, it's directly they were identified because of FRT. And why I'm linking these cases to the FRT investigations is because they identified two Muslim youth and kind of gave them their own intentions. So they're saying that Sazip took out a gun. The act of putting his hand in his pocket and taking out a phone and filming his shop being broken down is equated to him taking out a gun and firing at those people. So attaching your own ideas of what could have been happening, or basically negating what actually was there in the video footage. Of course, it is a case of video surveillance, and FRT is a case of video surveillance. Only it is giving you access to identify whoever there is, and I don't think so that without FRT, both Amir and Sazip could have been identified and would have been behind bars, so to say. I mean, I don't think so. Without FRT, the Delhi police could have used the massive amount of footage that it got after the riots were there, because apart from the footage that it had from the CCTV cameras, it also got a lot of video footage from concerned citizens in terms of mobile footage, camera recorded videos. And I would also like to tell you that there were a lot of cameras, of course, that had recorded the rioters. The real rioters, so to say, were wearing helmets, according to eyewitness accounts, who were chanting Jai Shri Ram, who had all sorts of equipment, hockey sticks and cylinders and gas cutters and stuff like that, who were never identified. And those footage have magically disappeared. Nobody knows where those camera footage were. If you speak to eyewitness, they would tell you that there were number of cameras that have captured people coming with really sophisticated implements to attack Muslims, and most of the Muslims were captured throwing stones or using rudimentary implements in self-defense. So the lawyers have told me that that footage has completely disappeared. Secondly, the idea of self-defense, which is part of our constitution. The constitution guarantees you certain relaxations if you've acted in self-defense, have completely been negated in the entire investigations. So anybody, throwing stones or doing anything has been arrested, especially Muslim youth. There has been, I think, 1 or 2 arrests of people from the majority community. So yes, FRT was used to identify people, and basis their identity, they were either they were either asked to go free or are still in jail. So which is how I think that is how I'm linking. This is, of course, it is a case of surveillance in general. Of course, I mean, who can deny that? But it's also a case of the use of facial recognition, without which none of these hundreds of people who are still in jail, without some of them just being on camera at the wrong time at the wrong place, would have been identified, would have been there on the camera. Thank you. I hope I answered the question, Arjun. Thank you.
Okay, we have another question from Philippa. How does the police in India understand and perceive the utility of facial recognition technology?
Philippa, I don't know how aware you are of Indian police. Police in India are not very technically savvy or educated. They don't really know how. I mean, it's a tool that they've been trained and very rudimentarily to use and to find out suspects. So in India, the FRT software that is being used is standalone. So for clarification, do they also use automatic? No, they don't use automatic FRT. It is a standalone system. So what they did was they got that footage and they ran that footage through that FRT software and identified people. So if you talk to them, they will say and they will agree that it's very good and it's very helpful and oh yes. But most of the technology that is being given to Delhi police right now is not something that they find very useful or they kind of use it in their daily policing. So policing in India is still very traditional. It's still based on informants. It's still based on beat policing. And that is why policing in India is very, very concentrated on petty theft, petty crime, in slums, in marginalized, in these spaces where thefts and certain kind of crimes are in large numbers. So very traditional. So my previous research is on predictive policing and the use of hotspot mapping in Delhi. But if you speak to people, if you speak to police officers on the ground, who actually are supposed to be using these hotspot maps, they wouldn't really use it. So yes, I mean they kind of think that these technologies are not very useful. They are not. They cannot replace human beings in terms of policing. But especially in the case of, I think in the case of riot investigations and also to identify certain problematic, so to say, protesters and say CA protests, they have found FRT to be quite useful because it was difficult for them to identify people. Of course, if it was a local kind of a situation, they would have identified people in the area. But because the protests were all over Delhi and people from one part of Delhi were going to the other parts of Delhi to participate in protest, I think they kind of found it very useful. But after that, if you see after the 2000, I mean after the riot investigations, we don't really know if FRT is being used for day-to-day policing. Only yesterday, no, day before yesterday, there was some kind of communal clashes in another part of Delhi, Northwest Delhi, which is again a resettlement colony, marginalized area. And then yesterday, the state government and the central government, in the pretext of demolishing illegal structures, kind of only demolished Muslim houses. So I'm also trying to understand if they identified those people using FRT or what was that, but I'm not being able to find that information. So I don't know whether in day-to-day policing they're using FRT, although there are talks of putting more and more CCTV cameras in Delhi, using automated FRT systems. There have been tenders by the National Crime Records Bureau to have software, to have CCTV cameras with automated FRT, where they could identify people even when they're wearing masks or big goggles, or if they're covering their faces in any manner. Although I mean there are these talks and there are these projects in the pipeline, but the exact utility on the ground is a bit suspect because when I speak to people on ground, police officers, they are not really into technology. They always say that you cannot replace a human being. You cannot replace how well we know our areas for day-to-day policing. So here and there, yes, they do understand, but they don't really understand. They don't. I mean, in policing in India, police in India don't really think technologies that good. They think human beings are better.
I think there is a follow-up question by Arjun. The hand is raised.
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, so I would just like to say something in the continuation of my previous question. So I'm trying to understand the discriminatory impacts of facial recognition on the marginalized community in India, right? So in this particular case, if you're using facial recognition technology, it kind of identifies or like creates bias in within binary parameters, right? So the main two biases could be either gender bias or racial bias. So in this particular situation, facial recognition was used to identify Amir and Sazip, but I am thinking of how it could cause bias in terms of religion, right? So just imagine if the situation was taking place in the farmers' protest, for example. Okay, so the individuals that the police would identify would obviously be more Hindus, because more Hindus were involved in the farmer protest, right? So I said the issue is more about surveillance because of this very reason, that facial recognition technology, like in this scenario, depends on the context where it is used and what kind of impacts it would cause on the marginalized community. So the problem is not exactly FRT, but I think how the Indian police is using the evidences generated by facial recognition technology. So do you know of any cases where in this particular riot, a Hindu was prosecuted?
Hi, Arjun. See, that's what I think. I kind of spoke about it in my presentation. I'm not saying religion is the only marginalization. When you are at farmer protest, if you're pro-farmers, I think that's also a certain kind of category for you to be prosecuted by the state. So I'm saying that these kind of technology are potent tools in the hands of a state, which can categorize you at whims as a normative, as not part of the norm, and then persecute you. So here it is religion. At farmers' protest, it could be, you being pro farmer law, anti-farmer laws. So and this discrimination, I am talking about this discrimination by the police, is because the police, in its very essence, I would argue, and I would argue very emphatically, is a casteist and discriminatory organization. And I have written a paper about it, that the use of registers, the use of paper-based registers that the police has, history sheeters and ruffian registers that the police uses. Very objective documents, if one would look at them, the way they record people who've been involved in crimes for 3 times. So if you are 3-time offender, you go in the history sheet. But dig a little deeper, and the kind of crime that would make you a history sheeter, the way you are surveilled, petty crimes, very, very visible surveillance. A beat officer looks at you. So how police officers do kind of conduct this surveillance in India, beat policing. So they kind of station themselves at these slums because they've already assumed that these slums are hotbed of crime, and obviously not without its. There is enough literature to correlate poverty with crime, slums with criminal crime hotbeds. So it's not like they are working on their own assumptions. They have literature and research and years and years of discriminatory practices to back them up. But they station themselves at these slums, these problem areas, according to their own work, and they look at these youth from these marginalized areas, Dalit youth, Muslim youth. And they would tell me that, ma'am, the moment they would buy something new, like a bike, or they would have some kind of fancy gear, we'll catch them and we'll put their names in the register, because there is no way that you can buy a bike without being involved in criminal activities. I mean, fair enough, but would you imagine that kind of surveillance on people in residential colonies in upscale Delhi, or resident welfare societies guarded and which has CCTV cameras. So the idea, I'm not saying that probably your surveillance is right, and when you found that the person bought a bike, he did buy it by crime money, but isn't the same thing happening in RWA societies? And aren't people also sometimes living out of their means because they're involved in criminal activities? Maybe not the kind of criminal activities that will put you in a ruffian register or a history sheeter, but criminal activities nonetheless. And if you have ever interacted with the police, they all, irrespective, believe that Muslims are criminals, that Dalits are criminals, that Bangladeshis are causing problems, that immigrants are criminals. So you take that knowledge, which is why I'm trying to make this entire presentation about seeing these technologies interacting with the social, the bureaucratic, the political, and if we are Indians and if we live in India and we understand India, we cannot say that the police doesn't really think about caste, doesn't really think about religion, because it's saying that the police in America is not anti-black. It's impossible. It's impossible. So when you have the police with a facial recognition technology and it's identifying people in that footage, it's looking at people, finding Muslim identities, nabbing them, putting them behind bars. The Hindus, there are currently, I've spoken to a couple of lawyers who are fighting cases. There are no Hindus who are still in jail because they were accused of riots. So you cannot say that, okay, this is just this is not religious discrimination. The FRT just kind of identified, which is what the Home Minister also said, that it is not discriminating. The FRT is not discriminating on the basis of gender, caste, or religion. Fine. But what about the institutions that are employing, that are designing? So, like I said, researchers have spoken at length about institutions that are designing these FRT. So we have established that these technologies are already racist and casteist and discriminatory. Now let's come to the institutions that are employing them for usage. And again, policing has been established as a very casteist, discriminatory, very anti-Muslim kind of an institution. With them, you can only imagine them identifying. So I also know about the police identifying certain people who were, not so problematic to them, so to say, and then calling them and saying that, your footage has been found and your face has been recognized, pay up so much money and we'll kind of delete that footage. So that has also happened with the police. So I'm saying that this is how recognition helps them further their agendas of how discriminated. They would have been obviously discriminatory nonetheless, but how you scale up that discrimination, how you scale up that being what you are is also supposed to be, it's also to be looked at. It's also important, and to not look at the kind of majoritarian Hindu whatever uprising that is going on in India, and then not think about these technologies in the hands of the state and the police, which is an extension of the state, being used against Muslims. I think, I don't know, you're not looking at the picture, the whole picture. So, which is my entire, thank you for asking this question. I think I made myself clearer that these are embedded in everyday notions of who is the criminal at the end of the day. I mean, we're in India, we follow the caste system. The lower caste are assumed to be criminal by birth. So it's a kind of biological, natural criminality that we follow. These people, they are like that. I think as an Indian, you must have heard about it. Your house help comes in, the kind of suspicion that you work with them. I mean, all Indians, for that matter, work with every day. You look at a slum and you see only crime. So, in that context, you have riots in a slum and an FRT identifying only certain kind of people, I think I made my point. Thank you.
Okay, many
All right,
thanks.
perfect. Thank you.
Are there any questions left? Feel free to ask whatever you want. If there are no other candidates, I think we can wrap up the discussion a bit earlier than foreseen, but that's okay. I want to thank everybody for being present, asking questions, and I want to thank especially Shivangi for doing the presentation. I enjoyed it a lot. Voila. Our next seminar is May 11th. It's a Wednesday. We'll discuss the challenges in the US about policing and AI. So it's kind of related to this one. So hope to see many of you May 11th.